Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. In today's special episode of Rules for You, Retrogrades, I'm going to be doing a post-mortem, a debate debrief from my Friday Timcast debate, Christianity battle royale between a Protestant Freemason named Laura Lodge. Aiden was the man's first name. I kept forgetting during it. Between Jay Dyer, representative of Orthodoxy from the East, and myself, the representative of Roman Catholicism. It was quite a watershed moment because there haven't been on Catholic channels or Orthodox channels or Protestant channels many three-way debates about Christianity and what it requires. But has there never, I mean never, been a three-part debate on a somewhat normie-ish, conservative, secular man's channel like Tim Pool's Culture War? I mean, this is groundbreaking stuff to have so much interest from places like The Blaze has just interviewed me. Tim, tell us your views on everything as a Catholic who is a patriarchalist. I did an extended interview with Blaze within the last 6 months. CNN came to my house and filmed me. What does a Catholic patriarchalist think about the synod, which, it was the eve of the synod, which gave us Leo the 14th. Timcast has had me on twice in the last 15 months, 16 months. Of course, there's Catholics in the popular media like Michael Knowles, who's always interested, in my opinion, but he's a very knowledgeable trad cath, and so I've been on Knowles' show about things related to the faith. But this is new, that someone that's never really been much interested in Christianity simpliciter wants on a Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox to talk to each other. And I can say this, I'm back. We made it. We took the 30-foot RV and the entire family between Wednesday night, when we left after dinner on Wednesday night. It's a fun way to travel by RV. If you can knock out 5 hours from 7 to midnight or 7:30 to 1, whatever we ended up driving that night, to pare down a 14-hour drive for the real first day of driving, you just stay in a Cracker Barrel parking lot. Blueberry pancakes. They're known as the finest pancakes on earth. I wish I were an actual paid endorser of Cracker Barrel. I'm going to try to get that job. It's really nice because you wake up, all 7 kids just fall asleep, time between, 11 and when you stop. You don't have to, we have the full hookups for the RV, but we get out there, we sleep in a Cracker Barrel parking lot with the smell of breakfast wafting into the RV all night long.
Smell of crackling bacon.
Yeah. A la Michael Gary Scott. And then just, I don't normally wake up early. I'm not an early to bed, early to rise guy, but on the road, I wake up at 7, go get some pancakes to go, and I get back in the RV and we're driving before the kids are even awake. It is just so much better than staying at hotels. And I'm like John Madden, I don't fly. So between Wednesday night and now Monday morning, I have gone there and back again like Bilbo Baggins with the entire family. I had a 30-foot RV to do it, but we went all the way to Tim Pool's location, beginning in what I call the Northeast, West Virginia, D.C., Maryland area. We'll just keep it at that. These places don't like their exact location known, but we got out there. I hung out with Jay a little bit and his wife, Jamie, a little bit the night before on Thursday night because we're quite friendly, just a little bit. Brought some of the kids over there, got up early Friday, and basically we'd just gotten into the hotel. We cleared out a room, stayed, 10 hours in that hotel, went to the 25-minute drive to Timcast, his studio, very fancy. And upon finishing that 2-hour debate, we were already on the road. We just found, with Jay and his wife, Jamie, we found a barbecue place that was kind of easy to get to from the road, and we were already on our way back. So imagine doing a 14-hour drive with 7 kids in a huge RV to a destination. You spend 2 hours doing your thing. I'm traveling mildly injured too, working with some mild injuries. So I felt like Jordan playing in the flu game. And then just you do the 2-hour debate, go get a bite to eat, and you're on the way back. You're just right on the way back, seeing on the left side of the road the shit you saw on the right side of the road on your way up. And it's 14 hours of drive. And you're going to stay another night in the Cracker Barrel parking lot. And it's blueberry pancakes and bliss all over again. So we are back in 3 nights time. And that was cool. Quite a lot of miles on the odometer. But it was well worth it because this is the work of the kingdom. Doing the work of the vineyard is the work of the kingdom. We're trying to show people why Roman Catholicism is the one true religion. And of course, as it always does, Roman Catholicism and its representatives, in this case me, have the bullseye painted squarely on their back, or in some cases on their front, because everyone understands intuitively, my friends, as my friend Jordan said this, that ours is the game to lose. Ours is the faith to beat. Everyone and no one takes Protestantism seriously. I think that became clear for all of the world when people saw Aidan, the Protestant Freemason, come out and say, he said in front of everybody, this. It was a stunning admission. I'm gonna hit you with this right now. Okay, stunning admission that Protestantism does not claim to be the one true faith. He said something like, well, I'm just
Twitter, because I could show that on screen if you want me to.
I'm just claiming that you guys aren't the true faith, or something like that. But yeah, I think that is on Twitter.
Yeah, I'll play it right now.
Yeah,
here's the clip Tim's talking about.
Cool. I mean, what's really cool about this from an anti-Protestant perspective, I'll say this in my opening statement, which I'll get to in a second. I'll play it for you in case you missed the Timcast debate altogether. You're living under a rock or something. Is that everyone is learning through the trueness of the baldness of the internet.
Somebody's saying that they're having a hard time. We couldn't hear it. I don't know why. Maybe you should just play it on your end. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't, because are you guys hearing my mic okay? Because I'm not. That's strange. Because
that bizarre moment on Timcast when the Protestant admitted that Protestantism is prima facie false. Could you turn up the Bluetooth, please?
Sure. Here we go. Try that. Tell me,
you guys. Clearly, the Anglican position, and by extension, the Methodist position, because Methodists are Anglicans, is that the Methodist Church, the Anglican Church, all of them, they're not the superior one true church.
Okay, well, that's a really strange thing to say. You know, for my money, for my time, for my Saturday night, getting up and going to mass or church or whatever the hell they call it, these Protestant guys, Protestantism is going away. On Sunday morning requires that I believe that this is true. That I don't know what gets Aidan out of bed in the morning. You know, he's a nice fella, but he's a Protestant Freemason. He's an Anglican who says, I don't really represent Anglicanism. Protestantism accepts Freemasonry, but then he had to say, I can't speak on behalf of Anglicans or Anglican Catholics or Methodists when I say nice things about the Masons. He's just a confused guy. Protestantism's going away because people are seeing that it shouldn't get you out of bed in the morning. If Protestantism were all there was, the soul of defectability, errancy, canniness, falsehood in the world, an abstract proto-Enlightenment rationalism that's vaguely pro-Jesus in some of its instances. In a lot of liberal Protestantism, they're not even vaguely pro-Jesus, but it's not the practice of a religion. And it's going away. The internet is making Protestantism go away. So this guy, again, Aidan, was irrelevant at this debate, and it was important that people saw that. It was important that people saw that. I think Jay would agree. The marks of true religion, even the false ones, we're going to talk about this at the end when we get to Nostra Aetate and Lumen Gentium, the way Jay and I were debating it. Even some of the false religions have true marks of religion that Protestantism lacks. A sacerdotal class, a class of priests. Protestants don't even have this. Ritual or liturgy. Even the pagan Greeks had this. Sacrifice, which really became sacrament through Christianity, but all the old religions at least poured out animal blood. Sacrifice, sacrament. Protestantism doesn't even have this. The ancient Greeks did. Jews and Muslims do. Even some of the polytheisms have it. Sacramentals, you know, like magic items. We have true magic items, that's the sacramentals. Don't get bent off about the language. And precepts, things you have to do every day. Islam has those 5 things. We have those things. We have to do things at least every 7 days, pray the prayer of the liturgy. Protestantism has none of these. So people are seeing, this is just my first takeaway, and there were major admissions by this guy, Aidan, who represented Protestants. You probably could have gotten a slightly better representative, but it never matters quite. Protestantism is false, and it's not just that it's a false religion. It's not even a religion. And I've been saying this to Catholic Answers since when I used to write for their magazine, which is a often forgotten fact. Protestantism, why do you guys spend so much time on Protestant? It's because of this. It's not even a religion, man. Orthodoxies are a competing form of the Christian religion. Catholicism, they're both apostolic and sacramental, and they have all these marks of religion: sacerdotal class, ritual, liturgy, sacrifice, sacrament, sacramentals, precepts. The ancient Greeks had this. It's just a false religion. We'll talk about religion qua religion at the end of this thing, because Jay wanted to get into it over Vatican II and Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate. But I just want to open by saying it's really impossible to do more than one can do across the boards. And it's impossible to take Protestantism seriously. So I wasn't at any point, I think I was pretty respectful in this thing. People were giving me high marks for respect while getting my points out. Thank you. But it was difficult for anyone who watched this thing, anyone. I didn't see one positive remark to take Aidan seriously. But don't blame that on him. Blame that on Protestantism. You just can't take it seriously, and it's not really a form of Christian religion.
People were laughing that he seemed to have changed his denomination a few times, like throughout the debate.
Yeah,
right at the beginning, and some people were saying, like, does this guy know what he believes? Which
is why it's like vague Enlightenment rationalism. Early Enlightenment rationalism. All the Enlightenment knew is the big enemy is the Roman Catholic Church. The big power. The big power in the West, the big power that built Western civilization. I'll give it to Orthodoxy. They really constructed a lot of important spirituality. Their fathers did, and they held up the Christian for a long time against the invading Saracens. But I mean, Roman Catholicism built the West, and the West, eventually superseded. So you just have to give it to us that Roman Catholicism is important, and you can't give anything. There's just not any little concession prize, any participation trophy you can give to Protestants. They're just early Enlightenment haters of the Roman Catholic Church, and that's why Aidan kept thinking he was going to link arms with Jay. Okay. I mean,
that was funny. That kept happening where he would link arms with Jay, and then Jay would turn around and be like, "Why are you a Freemason?"
Or more damning than that. I mean, that's really bad. Literally damning. You'll go to hell for being a Freemason. But as the church has rearticulated 7 different times in 7 bulls or encyclicals, and never had. There's no tension there. But the church has never reiterated that. But the bigger issue is that a Protestant, qua Protestant, is not sacramental Episcopal Apostolic Christianity. Christianity needs to have bishops who stand in the shoes of apostles, and it also needs to have sacraments as the primary conduits of grace. That's 2 of the 4 marks. Now, on the other 2 marks, Orthodoxy does fall short. It has to be one with itself, of one mind, and it's got to be Catholic, meaning you have it's taught everywhere and for all times, both spatially and temporally. So, but I mean, Orthodoxy does have 2 of the 4 marks, or Protestantism has none of them, and it's going away. It really is going away. So, if the debate, my thing was going into it, if we're going to be talking about what's the superior form of Christianity, Tim said it was Roman Catholicism, but he said it with his tongue in his cheek. In a tweet. And Jay, I think, originally had been like, why don't we debate this? So I'm not going to sit here and claim, especially prior to the debate, Tim Pool was saying, non-ironically or something, that Catholicism is the superior form of Christianity. He said it with his tongue in his cheek, even though it's true. He was being tongue in cheek when he made this admission. So
I think people miss one of the greater parts of your debate too. Like the mic kept muting out on you on some things that you were saying when everybody was just shouting over each other. And you had told the Protestant guy, I don't know if people noticed, because I certainly did. I was in the green room watching it on screen, that he kept saying being like blasphemy.
OMG.
He kept saying OMG, and you were like, you had said to him, you're like, because I'd asked you after the debate, I was like, why was he blaspheming so much? And you're like, didn't you hear me say, like, stop blaspheming? But I guess it didn't actually make it on. So
I said, dude, stop taking the Lord's name in vain. Stop blaspheming. You can't say OMG. You can't say JC. Christians out there. Weirdly, I hear a lot of holy priests do it. I think because they're usually happy and they're usually in a prayerful state of mind, but they'll say OMG. I'm like, you can't do that. That's a really facial violation of, the commandment. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. And I'll have Christians, Catholics, in my comments clutching their pearls over saying fuck or shit, which are not a sin. It's not even a venial sin. It's just impolite. And they'll say, OMG, you have to stop saying, fuck or shit, Tim. You just committed a mortal sin. I've committed lots of sins in my day, but I have committed nothing by saying these poo-poo potty words that you tell, you don't want your real little kids saying them. But you go to hell for saying OMG or JC, My favorite TV shows regularly say this. My ears start to bleed. That was what happened. That was what was happening with Aiden, and I was saying something to Jay afterwards. Did you hear all the blasphemy? And this is one reason people ask why Jay and I get along. Good common sense. I mean, you didn't see the best representation of it in the debate with all kinds of interruptions and frustrations and stuff. But what I do like about Jay is he was like, yeah, man, like you can't say OMG, you can't say JC, like all self-censor there. Use mentioned distinction notwithstanding. There's a use-mention distinction in analytic philosophy between using a bad word and mentioning it. I'm not going to say the F word or the N word. I mean, I'm not going to say those. Like I'll use those words if I feel like it, and I do. But I will not. You will not hear me saying, because it's not in a habit. I haven't said it once. I haven't had to confess it once in 10 years or more. OMG or JC, what those actually stand for. I'm not even going to say the expressions now. And he just kept saying it. And I just don't think Protestants understand what Enlightenment thinkers they are. They're just confused Enlightenment thinkers. But there's really no ground, there's no room, I'll say, at the table for a Protestant here. Because as you saw with Aiden, he didn't understand what Jay meant when he talked about ecclesiology. The whole ball game is between the two true forms of Christianity. And Orthodoxy is a true form of Christianity. They're just schismatics. They just acknowledge the Pope for 1,000 years in ways that really is the heart of the debate. And then stopped for the last 1,000 years. And there's not really a good account for why did you do this, and they kind of just whistle past that. Why? You can't just acknowledge the Pope for 1,000 years. I'm going to read you some really crazy instances of their robust acknowledgement of the Pope for the first 1,000 years. Oh, it just went away? The mark of unity, the visible sign of unity on earth, the one thing to keep the church together, to be able to get the conciliar dogma stamped, to get the people together for the conciliar dogma. I know emperors called the first 7 councils. I'm not quibbling, but there has to be a Christian who's in charge of the church, who is in charge of firing people. The old Dunder Mifflin standard of, or is Dwight Schrute really our boss just because Michael stepped out for the day for his colonoscopy or whatever? Well, if he can't fire people, he ain't boss. I mean, I'm not trying to be overly avuncular here, but that's really everyone understands to be the true mark of a boss. And from the very start, I'm going to read you these councils that I read to Jay. This is the mark. You guys acknowledged having a boss, even if it was a collegial boss, for the first 1,000 years, and then just without ever really giving a robust account for why, or even a semi-rational account for why. So we don't need boss anymore. So that's where Aiden kept thinking he could turn to Jay and be like, yeah, we don't like the Pope. But the difference is Orthodox are real Christians. They have apostles, right? I mean, their bishops stand in the sandals of apostles. And they because they have apostles, they have priests and deacons, and they have real sacraments. all 7 of them, and they have the sacramentals, and they have all the marks of true religion. There are precepts. They're basically the same. I think we think Catholics are like, they're just cliques without the Pope. I know you got the filioque, and I know you got leavened or unleavened bread, and some major disciplinary changes, but even Catholics have like 22 or 23 rites that are acceptable. There's not just the Latin rite and the Novus Ordo versus TLM. You got all these other rites that were made as concessions during the Great Western Schism to keep Eastern Catholics from becoming Eastern Orthodox. We're like, well, you can share a liturgy with them. You just have to say the filioque during your liturgy. But other than that, they have an Orthodox liturgy. They just have a Catholic theology of the filioque during the thing. And now we don't even make them say it in the liturgies anymore. So we really don't. We really think that Orthodox are basically Catholics without the Pope. We don't look at them all differently from a sedevacantist. And they don't like this, but we're kind of the big dogs, and we're like, you guys just need to get hip with the Pope again, the way you were in the first 1,000 years. We don't have as expansive a view of the disparity between the two sects on even the filioque. And we're the big dogs. And we're more friendly about it than they are. But that's because they have to justify with theological reasons why they can have a pope for 1,000 years. Quibblings, they never liked it, but they were clear about it. I'm going to read that to you as I read it to Jay, from Ephesus, from Nicaea II, from Constantinople III, from Constantinople IV, and then from even the Union of Florence, which is like the 17th council or something by our count. Them saying, we have a pope, we acknowledge the pope. At Florence, they even acknowledged the filioque was right. But they have to expand upon the filioque and leavened and unleavened bread to justify why were you okay with the Pope for 1,000 years and then not for another 1,000 years. They have to say, well, because he's a heretic. So they're basically just the first sedevacantists in the true Catholic view, and I'm giving you the overview. That's really all they are. And people are always like, why are you so friendly with Jay? People ask me the same thing about sedes, because I get some of their qualms. I get some of the easy pitfalls. I get some of the ostensible tensions that they think are outright contradictions. I mean, by they, I mean both EOs and sedes. And there's a philosophical coherence. If those tensions they're pointing at are actual contradictions, well, then maybe you'd have to be EO or a sedevacantist. And that's what came out when we were talking about Vatican II. I wanted to talk more about Vatican I, but it ended up being Vatican II, and I'm very comfortable with it. But that's why. I mean, Protestants don't really fit. We have to get into the nitty-gritty, which means talk about what the first 7 councils require, because we agree about those. So you find common ground and you say, what do they require? What do these constitutions require? What action? What conclusion? What other propositions? And Protestants don't even know. Aidan kept saying, well, we have bishops. No, you don't. The Orthodox do. The Catholics do. You guys aren't really even Christian. You have a Trinitarian baptism, and you have these vague ideas that Jesus is on the whole good. That's all they have. It's not a religion. It's a worldview.
Book
it's
club.
Like Buddhism is a book club. It's not really a religion. Get your heads around this. Orthodox and us, we can talk. They have some revisionist historiography that I think is really confusing and borderline deceptive, but they have all the real stuff of real religion, and that's why Ratzinger in 2004 said you can capitalize the C in church when you're talking about the 14 or whatever autocephalous Orthodox churches. You can't say that. It's a low C congregation when you're talking about one of these Protestant goofballs.
Vatican I, Elijah Yazzie is in chat right now, so thanks to Elijah.
Yeah, thanks, Elijah, for all the help.
And he mentioned, he said Dyer is very predictable. That's why he would be easy to debate on a moderated platform. You and Jay, we all had lunch after the debate, by the way. It was a very lovely lunch. His wife is just incredible. She's very sweet. But nice, you guys talked about this, lady. Like doing an actual moderated debate.
Yeah, we just want a platform like Tim Pool that would do it. I knew going in, the only thing I didn't want to do that I do know Jay's stuff that the only thing I don't mind people getting hot under the collar, and then you go shake hands and have lunch later. When it's a cool guy and you're kind of friends, I don't really care. They called me Judd Nelson or Creed or whatever. That I just don't care. I'm thick-skinned that way. I'll play one-on-one with my close friend, and we're nearly getting into a fight, and then go hang out later. That's just anybody that's not a weenie can do that. But I don't like the interrupting. So I told Jay this at lunch. I was like, I love you, bro, but like, we should redo this. This was kind of a shit show at times because of all the interrupting, and it was becoming a farce. And it's also sort of silly to invite the Protestant. We kind of just established for all the world's eyes, or whoever ends up watching this thing, we're not going to exclude the Protestant the next time we do this to be mean, or because either Catholics or Orthodox are dodging Protestants' 508-year-old arguments. They're just silly. Everyone saw Protestants don't really deserve a seat at the table, because in some sense, Orthodoxy goes all the way back to Jesus in many senses. But Catholics get mad when I say this. Oh, they only go back to 1054. Yeah, but there was always a Western lung of the church and an Eastern lung of the church. The Eastern lung of the church was Catholic until they stopped acknowledging the Pope in 1054. And for like 10 or 15 years after the Council of Florence, they re-acknowledged him, and then got bullied by their own people with pitchforks into not acknowledging him again. But in some sense, there were real cultural differences between Rome and Constantinople, going back to Constantine, going back to the Edict of Milan, going back to the travails of the Roman Church dealing with Vandals, Visigoths, Huns, and the Eastern Church not having to deal with all those invaders until out of the Arabian desert spring these the towel guys, the Muslims. That was the only real challenge they ever had. But the Muslims weren't claiming to be Christian, and this is relevant also to what we're going to talk about with Nostra and Lumen later. The Muslims were like, look, we're Ali, we're Muhammad, we're just going to dominate you and fight Constantinople. But the Visigoths and Vandals were largely the Arian guys, and they're like, we'll just this kind of all makes sense to us. You Christians having you have three gods. No, we have one God and three people. So a lot of the Visigoths and Vandals, and the Angles, the Saxons, the Celts, the Franks, all of these people who flooded through the West, we constantly had to accommodate without capitulating. Or accommodate might be the wrong, no one clipped that. We constantly had to take them into the church and correct them. And that's what all of those really 6 of the first 7 councils were about. Visigoths and Vandals misunderstanding Christianity as a kind of polytheism, because they're like, oh yeah, I get that. Like Zeus has a son, Heraclius. It's like, no, it's not like that. But
you made a great joke on the way down about the origins of Protestantism. You were like, that was because like some horny king wanted to make it with all the mids in the county.
Yeah, the people like maids, like no mids, because like a horny fat. Well, I mean, we only have Protestantism because Martin Luther kept getting into duels, literally duels, which was a capital offense, and he's like, I hate being a monk, but I have to pretend I'm a monk basically because then I'm given sanctuary. He kept getting into duels, and he never liked it. He was never a good monk. You've been lied to about who Martin Luther was. He's a fraud. And he just stayed in there, and he's like, well, I'll subvert it. I'll bring the whole thing down. He was a nominalist. He studied at Erfurt, which was the center of nominalism in Northern Europe. He was a nominalist. You can't be a Christian and a nominalist. That's what he truly believed in there at Erfurt. You need to learn about who Martin Luther really was. I mean, he's the reformer. Well, Aidan was saying, well, the Reformation began with all these preformers. No, it began in 1517, and it's fraudulent. And the English Reformation was just because you had a fat, horny king who wanted to make it with all the mids in the county. And in Catholicism, we have never capitulated on divorce. He was horny. He was fat. He was a horny fat guy who wanted to go for some slightly less fat chicks. And that's literally why Anglicans LARPed as, well, we're still Romish, we'll still wear the collar, we just want divorce. And then you have Calvin and all the Reformed. It's so silly. Anyone who takes Protestantism seriously is silly. If you take Orthodoxy seriously, I don't think you're I don't think you're silly. They're real Christians. But the claims for the papacy are indisputable. And this is why people said I did a good job of not taking the bait. Look, here's my one thing. We need a new debate on a bigger channel. I'm talking to some of the biggest channels about a very structured debate with zero interrupting. I don't care if you call me names in your time to speak, but I'm not going to use my time to speak. This is why I'm good at not ceding ground. I'm not going to use my time to speak in my opening statement or second opening statement, which I'll play in a second, to address some point. I'm not bound to address a point that Jay or Aiden raises just because he rushed in and made the first point. I'm like, say whatever you want to say in your opening statement. I'm going to say the prepared stuff I have to say in the opening statement, and guess what? It's devastating. I've also never said that when you have a one Holy Catholic Apostolic Church, the way only Catholicism does, that because it's not fractile, it hasn't fractured, that there's not, you maintain, instead of schismatizing and going into your own little sects where it's easy to maintain unity, because anytime there's any minor disagreement, you just become a different church or a different tradition or whatever. In Roman Catholicism, because of its non-fractile nature, we keep everyone in that we can that's willing to be with the creed. There will be Jesuits. That was another funny moment when the Protestant guy literally didn't know that all Catholics roll their eyes at the last 150 years worth of Jesuits. We have a bigger tent, but that's why it's important to have a magisterium. You see, there's an inverse correlation between, if you just are schismatic and you're like, we're just going to break off. Well, you ought to be tight with one another with respect to your little sect, schismatic sect. So you ought to have unicity within the, it's like e pluribus unum in reverse. It's like out of the many one. Well, within your many, you ought to be one. It's like the opposite of e pluribus unum. It's easy. I'm not impressed with that. What's impressive about Roman Catholicism, in the spirit of our Lord's words, when the Spirit of truth come, he will guide you into all truth, in John 16. The gates of hell will not prevail my church, Matthew 16. The church of the living God is the pillar and bulwark of truth, 1 Timothy chapter 3. What's impressive about Roman Catholicism is that even though we're huge and big tent, we still have unicity, but the only way to keep unicity isn't to say, well, there can be no like Jesuits who are super, super liberal. We just say their proposals, even though they had the ear of the Pope at Vatican II, the Jesuits did, they will never be dogmatized. We will always kind of slap them down. And Aiden didn't understand this, and there were times when even Jay, who seems to, he understands church history well, he seemed not to understand it. There's an inverse correlation. If you just become one of 14 autocephalous churches, some of them have contraception, which violates the natural law. How can some violate the natural law but not others, and you still uphold the mark of the church, one Holy Catholic and Apostolic? That's a fundamental problem with the principle of contradiction. How can some of them allow divorce but not others, which the 14 autocephalous churches have disparity there? This violates our Lord's most basic precept. If you divorce your wife and marry another, you're committing adultery. Full stop in one of the Gospels. How do you have that? You're violating eternal law with a divorce, and you're violating natural law with contraception, and you just say, well, if I go to this autocephalous church, it's cool. If I go to this one, it's not cool. And of course, I won't even get into Protestantism.
Sorry if we have a little bit of a lag. We have a major storm happening right now in Mississippi, so our internet might be a little bit sketch.
In other words, as John chapter 17 said, Jesus wanted his followers to be all one so that the world may believe. Because you can't believe unless the Christian church is teaching one. That's why we need to have the four marks of the church: one, Holy, Catholic, Apostolic. Roman Catholicism is true because only Roman Catholicism of these three competing forms is one and Catholic, lowercase c Catholic. Together with the Orthodox, they are holy, which is why I try to be respectful when I talk about their bishops and priests. These guys are really from the apostles. They are holy and they are apostolic. They have sacraments and they have bishops. But they don't have oneness or Catholicity. Jesus wanted his followers to, I'll quote scripture, all be one so the world may believe. You can't believe something if you're not of one mind on it. Well, what do Christians teach about contraception? You can't have half of the Orthodox believing it's licit and half the Orthodox believing it's illicit. Or even women deacons. It's not half, but some of them have women deacons. Some of them don't. That's a fundamental, that's not just a disciplinary thing. That's a dogmatic thing because of who women are, because of what you guys are. Same thing with, some of the other issues. So Protestantism, which we're not going to talk about because it's so irrelevant, it professes the exact opposite of indefectibility. Literally expressing that for a millennium and a half, the church taught and acted consistently errantly, and that somehow the reformers, 1,500 years in, fathomed out of thin air the correct anti-religious teachings, which are really spiritual but not religious. 1,500 years after Christ lived. They're not a religion. They don't have the marks of even natural religion. They're proto-Enlightenment rationalism. Vaguely pro-Jesus. Orthodoxy, on the other hand, has to be taken a great deal more seriously. They're 95% Catholic, arguably more, just without the Pope. They're arguably basically the first sedes. They subvert indefectibility by the papal about-face 1 millennium, 1,054 years into Christian history. They were cool with the Pope. Not totally cool with it, but dogmatically cool with it. I will prove this to you. For 1,054 years, they're always reluctant and hesitant because they were the eastern lung of the church. This is my right hand here, even though it's flipped for you. This is the western lung of the church. Rome, and then Constantinople and the other major patriarchal sees. They didn't love it, but they did admit it in several binding places that the Pope is not just the first among equals, which is sort of a nonsense term that doesn't mean anything, like mutual submission, that doesn't really mean anything, that he was boss, that he could fire the number 2 in the church, which say excommunicate him. Wow. Jesus set up the papacy, as we say, and as scripture says, making it an essential formal feature of full Christianity. I'll read you the papal scriptures affirming this. There are 3 places where we say the papacy goes all the way back to Jesus handing Peter the keys. Therefore, you can't be full Christianity if you don't have the papacy. That's really what they're missing.
I really love your point about mutual submission, because the feminists are seeking to do exactly what the Orthodox are doing. They're trying to mitigate authority. Okay, that happened right on the tree outside. Sorry. Thunder. So like that point, that saying first among equals is as stupid as mutual submission.
It is. It's ecclesial mutual submission. This first among equals business, where they try to acknowledge their very tortured first millennium on papality, pontificality, the fact that the Pope has a head, that Peter is called the Prince of the Apostles, and his successor is called by Prince of the Apostles even by the Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus, or the foundation of the church, and sometimes Basil the Great, John Chrysostom, many of the patriarchs of Constantinople. After affirming the headship of the Pope at Ephesus, Nice 2, Constantinople 3, Constantinople 4, the Orthodox version, Florence, these councils, under the protection of Christ, which taught the papal claims, the Orthodox then flip-flopped in the second Christian millennium, and without any reason why it would be okay to do this, rejected the headship of the Pope in the second millennium. And they just whistle past the graveyard on that. You acknowledged the Pope for 1,000 years. The filioque being added by Charlemagne against the urgings of Pope Leo III. He said this is sort of bad optics to allow Charlemagne to add the filioque to the creed. That is not a dogmatic, that's not the heresy they think it is. But the church is even lenient on enforcing when and where they say it, because we don't have as expanded a view of its importance as they do. What's up?
Sorry, these papers are making noise.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. And that will not get you off the horn, Orthodox friends, brothers in Christ. I mean this sincerely. We're always saying this to Protestants, but the Orthodox are our brothers in Christ. It doesn't get you off the horn Like, we're supposed to pretend not to notice that you guys talked for 1,000 years about the Pope as your head, the Prince of the Apostles, who has a universal appellate jurisdiction to fire your patriarch. We're going to talk about Ephesus right now, as I did to Jay. And then pretend just that we don't notice that they reversed on this in the second millennium. And that because they reversed on it, because they lack a visible sign of unity for the church, that they're just not of one mind on all these important moral theological issues. They can't be, because without a pope, as Solovyov said when he converted or thought about converting, without Papa, you can't call the brothers to the table, which is why in 2016 they couldn't get, I think, Ukraine to come to what was supposed to be the Pan-Orthodox Council. Now, I know the popes didn't call the first 7 councils, the emperor did, but we don't have emperors anymore, and that was always an accidental feature anyway. School buses are always yellow, but they don't need to be yellow. Yellowness remains an accidental property. It's an ecumenical council, and it's got to have all the bishops of the world, and you can't get everyone there unless you have an authority to do it. You need Papa. Okay, look at what happened at Council number 3, which they accept. This is damning. This is important. This is indefatigable logic. This is, I think, indisputable logic. Because we together, Catholics and Orthodox, accept the first 7 councils: Nicaea, Constantinople I, Ephesus, Chalcedon, Constantinople II, Constantinople III, Nicaea II. And then those are the first 7. And then Constantinople IV, we say, was what took place in 869. They say it took place in 879, and they're kind of different specific gatherings with different conclusions. But I'm even going to read you their 879 version of the 8th Council. So buckle up. So I'm going to read you those, and those are the real heart of this basic proposition. I think Jay was trying to throw me off my gate. They'll never address this. Is there a Christ-instituted center of the church, head of the church? Is there a Christ-instituted head of the church, i.e. Peter? If there is, QED, Roman Catholicism is true. We know you guys have real bishops. You guys have a cool prayer life. You have cool liturgical traditions. Robust spirituality. The Desert Fathers are mainly kind of Eastern lung, but they're Catholic because they had the Pope. That's what you say about all the Eastern guys from the first millennium, but they were Catholic even though they were in your area of the world and under your liturgies because they acknowledged the Pope. If there's a Christ-instituted head of the church, Peter and his successors, the Prince of the Apostles and his diocesan successors, then Roman Catholicism's true. I'm not going to waste time with the stupid, silly little instances of like the third half millennium of the Pope, where, you know, between 1000 and 1500, there are some tensions that require some actual interpretation, which has been done. You saw people were praising me. I'm not going to fall for that head fake. The big question is, you Orthodox seemed to acknowledge a head of the church, a visible sign of unity, and a universal appellate jurisdiction, a guy that could fire even the number 2 in the church, a Peter, who could fire the Andrew, for 1,000 years, and then you stopped. If there is a Christ-instituted head of the church, then Roman Catholicism is true, because Protestantism doesn't even have bishops. Orthodoxy does have bishops, but if they acknowledged a head bishop with universal jurisdiction for 1,000 years and then they stopped, then Roman Catholicism is true. Could you let's just play my opening statement, the debate debrief thing, Steffi?
I'm wondering if I'm going to try playing it with the video for you guys, because that's preferable. If you have a hard time hearing this clip, just interrupt me and I'll stop it, and Tim, you can play it on your end. I don't know why.
Once it starts playing, people make your comment. Don't make the comment at the end. Oh, well, that was a 3-minute clip. I didn't hear it. Say it right away, please, because I don't know why we're having an issue with that, because this mic is picking me up. So let's see. Okay, Tom, here we go. Let me do this.
sound. Okay. I don't know why. It's picking up on my end. Weird. Very weird.
Here,
okay.
I'll play it then.
Just play it over the Bluetooth and I'll...
You can keep the video up.
Okay, we'll just start at the same time. How about that?
Okay. We'll go,
okay. All right, ready?
We'll go 3, 2, 1, boom.
Great. Catholicism is the one true church. We make this claim based on many premises, but the first ones are this: indefectibility. The church can never defect. It won't defect. Our Lord promised that when the Spirit of truth comes,
hasn't
truth, will guide
defected
you into all truth. In John's Gospel, gates of hell won't prevail against the church. In Matthew's Gospel, in 1 Timothy, the Church of the Living God is the pillar and bulwark of truth. And therefore, our Lord is a liar if there is some change. And you know, this is a little bit funny because what I'm going to be doing is talking about super specific church terms, religion terms with Jay today, and then we'll be talking about more broad things, because really Protestantism isn't technically a religion. It's a faith. But we can talk about things like the ecumenical councils, the first 7 ecumenical councils, about which Orthodox and Catholic agree in something like 4 of these first 4 ecumenical councils. I'll read you chapter and verse. But the Orthodox has a view of the Pope, which is the church's view, the church's second millennium view of the Pope. And the Orthodox defected on this. Now, Protestants defected. They represent the soul of defectibility. Indefectibility means that nothing's going to change. Protestants are a religion that sprang forth from the earth like Athena from Zeus's head in the 16th century. It's proto-Enlightenment abstract rationalism that's vaguely pro-Jesus. But Orthodox Catholic debates are more specific, because we have to talk about what at the very least, the first 7 ecumenical councils require. And the first 7 ecumenical councils about which Jay and I agree, if you go to like number 3, Ephesus involves the Patriarch of Constantinople, the highest guy in their second millennium church, being fired. Being requested to be fired by other Eastern Orthodox guys like Cyril of Alexandria. He writes the Pope and he says, can you excommunicate the Patriarch of Constantinople, Nestorius, because he's saying this absurdism, like unto what many Protestants say today, that Mary's the mother of Jesus but not God. And so, kind of like Dwight Schrute says in The Office, if you are the guy that's actually boss, you can make a firing. And tons upon tons upon tons of first millennium Eastern thinkers from the Eastern lung of the church associated with Orthodoxy, but also Catholic saints like the Cappadocian Fathers, all the Gregories, St. Basil the Great, they acknowledge the unity, the visible sign of unity that is represented on earth by the Pope and the headship of the Pope. Just tons upon tons of these guys, and tons upon tons of the councils. Also, Nicaea II, Constantinople III, Constantinople IV, we kind of disagree with them about it. And even the Union of Florence, at the Council of Florence, which is an ecumenical council, it was called by an emperor. Well, a lot of people don't know this. We had a reunification of the Catholic and the Orthodox churches, and it was a legit unification. 31 out of 33 bishops in whatever it was, 1439, of the Orthodox came and voted for unification, including the Patriarch of Constantinople. And then they went home, and essentially they were strong-armed into nullifying the unification. So
let's try and simplify as much as we can, real quick, to Mick's point, because I do have a question. But is the Orthodox argument is you want to stay true to the original view of Scripture? And
absolutely not.
And is the Catholic view that it can be updated and changed by the political structures?
Absolutely not.
I would say you have that reversed. The Orthodox, always being centered in Constantinople, were close to the emperor. The first thing Constantine did, after he legalized Christianity with the Edict of Milan, is he moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople. He named the city after himself, which is a badass move, Chad move, and it is Tim City, Constantine City. And so the Orthodox, over the remainder of the first Christian millennium, they had the Patriarch of Constantinople, who would be elevated to the second most powerful under Rome eventually. And they always had, they were next to the emperor. And so they were always alongside the emperor. And of course, there's more.
Pause there, Stevie. The reason I said this, I didn't quite put the cherry on top, put the lid on the jar, is because the Orthodox in the East were able to focus on spirituality. The Patriarch there always was in the same city for the next several hundred years after, the 300s, when Constantine moved to the East. They always had sort of the emperor calling councils, guiding the political administration of the people who are going to the Orthodox liturgies. And, that's a luxury they had. We had Constantine in Rome until he moved there. So really at the start of organized Christianity, stoners and atheists will always say organized religion. Christianity was not an organized religion for the first 317 or 327 years, whenever the Edict of Milan was. And because we had to hide underground. We literally had to say our liturgies around the Mediterranean, just underneath the ground in the catacombs. And there are these different liturgical traditions that sprang up, all of which had some common threads, like the Eucharist and saying the Creed, but have legitimacy in their disparity of discipline, because everyone was just secretly doing them around the Mediterranean and in the Middle East. That's fine. That's great. but it became an organized religion with Constantine, who legalized it. The second thing he does is he takes the roadshow, Antiques Roadshow, from Rome to Constantinople. So Rome, in the church, because the government had basically abandoned the people as the collapse in Rome was spreading from west to east over the next 150 years, Rome was just there being a field hospital as both not only the spiritual administrators, but in many ways, the quasi-political administrators. And Rome, this also was consistent with who Rome was, because the Roman See was the first among non-equals, a collegial Petrarchy. Petrarchy means Rome, Constantinople, and the other three Sees, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria. Rome was always in charge, and so it had this dual function that confused a lot of people, even a lot of Catholics. They never had that dual function in Constantinople because for the organized period, one, they were never in charge the way Rome was, and two, they had the emperor right in their city. I didn't make that point so well there because I was afraid of being... I kind of gave you the premises, but I didn't stick the conclusion on there. I'm going to hit play again right now, but I wish I'd stuck that on. I knew I was about to get interrupted, though. Here we go.
Orthodox churches, so they don't even agree on things like whether they can't be one, because they can't be true to the gospel, because they don't agree on things like whether you can have divorce, whether you can have contraception. Whereas the Roman Catholic Church, under the single sign of unity, the Pope, which everybody hates, they
Everyone
are
here
kept together. And the second millennium Catholic view of the Pope is exactly what the first millennium Pope was.
But based on
So that's the center of the argument. Is one, Vatican I is the council very late in the history, very 11th hour, which codified the dogma of what actually a pope is. And it codified in a largely misunderstood way exactly what the view of the pope had always been from the first millennium, there toward the end of the second millennium. So people misunderstand that. But remember, Vatican I happened 800 years after the Orthodox split off from us. So they already didn't like the pope before Vatican I was even widely misunderstood. And if you can prove that the Vatican I iteration of the Pope, which exists today, is what they were even acknowledging there at Ephesus in the as early as the Third Council, then you prove that Roman Catholicism is the true form of Christianity. Here's what happened at Ephesus. Cyril of Alexandria writes, he's an Alexandrian, but he writes to Rome, and he says to Pope Celestine, can you please excommunicate Nestorius, who's teaching heresy, Nestorianism, that Mary is the mother of human Jesus, but not God Jesus. This is splitting Jesus's persons, which can't happen. And this was a heresy, and it was codified. But he's literally making this appeal to Peter. And he says, we rely on the authority of the blessed apostle Peter, on whom the church was founded, which is that language all the Eastern fathers use, the foundation of the church, on whom the church was founded, and whose successor, all the popes, all the new Peters, the blessed Pope Celestine is. We rely on the authority of the blessed apostle Peter. We rely on your see, which is in charge, in other words. Cyril again says this to Celestine, your holiness, who holds the place of Peter, the prince of the apostles, has rightly judged this matter and condemned Nestorius. Nestorius was, I don't think he was number 2 in the church yet. He might have been 3, 4, or 5 until at some point the Patriarch of Constantinople became number 2. But at Ephesus, they write, holy and blessed Peter, the prince and head of the apostles. Does this sound like an egalitarian Patriarchy? No, this is the prince and head of the apostles, Peter, the column of faith, another term that a lot of the Eastern fathers use for the Pope. The foundation of the Catholic Church received the keys of the kingdom from our Lord Jesus Christ, and that to him was given the power of binding and loosing sins, who until this day and forever lives and judges in his successors.
And forever.
Forever. You go to the successors of Peter to bind and loose universally, which will even be added at Constantinople IV by the Orthodox. He can fire the number 2 in the church, or whatever, number 3, number 4, number 5. There's no one else that can do it. There's one head of the church. It's the Bishop of Rome. He's got an appellate jurisdiction, which is why we're appealing to his jurisdiction. And, The Orthodox just whistle past this point, and they'll hit you with obscurantisms like, they're Vigilius. And no one's interested in even the stuff I'm saying, even though it's a big picture. Then they want to hit you with little obscurantisms like Vigilius and Unum Sanctum. And there are, of course, there are answers here, but I refuse to get off the path. And little maybe ultramontane expressions of the papacy from slightly more triumphalistic times in the church. Those are little problems, and they have explanations, but in due course, we're going to deal with them chronologically according to their importance. What the Orthodox have to answer you is, why did this happen at Ephesus? Why were they saying the Pope is our boss, our visible sign of unity, the foundation of our faith, the supreme ruler of the other? Now, it's collegial. He doesn't go around bossing around the other bishops unless there's an issue. At Nicaea II, the letter of Pope Hadrian read that there's primatial authority among the primates. He was the authority. Everyone on earth was given by the Redeemer of the world himself, that's Jesus, to the blessed Apostle Peter. Through the same apostle, the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Roman Church has held till now and will hold for all time primacy and sovereign authority. What is for all time? What are they saying in 1054 and 1055 and 1056? The Holy Catholic and Apostolic Roman Church has held till now and will hold for all time. I'm going to underline it just for myself so I can yell about it later. Primacy and sovereign authority. They acknowledge this until 1054. In 1053, he's the Pope. He's our boss. We appeal to him to excommunicate certain bad guys like Nestorius. Of course, this is Nicaea too, so it's a different issue. But after that, 1054, 1055, now he doesn't hold for all time primacy and sovereign authority. Well, you move from for all time to not for all time. Now we just don't have a pope. And that's what's called defectibility. Look at Constantinople III, the letter of Pope St. Agatho. Rome has never erred from the path of the apostolic tradition, nor has she been depraved by yielding to heretical innovations. But from the beginning, she has received the Christian faith from her founders, the princes of the apostles of Christ, and remains undefiled to the end, according to the divine promise of the Lord and Savior himself. So, what do you say to this? Here are the three main papal scriptures. I'm going to go on to Constantinople IV and Florence in 879 AD, then 1439 AD. But here are the big papal scriptures that... Because talking to Protestants is stupid. Spending your time talking to orthos is not stupid, right? We have a common language because they actually acknowledge history. They actually have bishops. They have sacraments. We just have to talk to them and hopefully not be interrupted and not be yelled at. Luke chapter 22, about which the exegetes in both the West and the East, the patristics, have written much, saying what we say. Peter, Peter, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he might sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith fail not, meaning till all time. And when you are converted, strengthen your brethren. He's saying this to Peter, strengthen your brethren. This one's a little less clear, I think. I mean, you don't say, okay, this is a universal sovereign jurisdiction. But combine it with Matthew 16. To you, Peter, I will give the keys of the kingdom of heaven. That's huge. Straight out of Judaism. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then the third one is John chapter 21, where he says, feed my sheep 3 times. Well, none of these are, because I'm a constitutional scholar and a constitutional attorney originally, in addition to an Aristotomist scholar. What is required by these 3 passages, I'd like a little bit more. Well, almost all of the patristic fathers, West and East, there are originally 4 big patristics in the West and 4 big ones in the East, and there are a lot of medium and smaller patristics that count, that qualify. They're all saying that these 3 passages mean the Bishop of Rome has this sovereign appellate jurisdiction. Okay, so when you look at something like, let's look at Constantinople IV, this is really bad for them. The letter of Pope John VIII. In 879, this is even the Orthodox parsing For just as the apostolic throne, having received the keys of the kingdom of heaven from the first and great high priest, Jesus Christ, through the chief of the apostles, Peter, he has the authority of universal binding and loosing. This is universal jurisdiction, which is precisely proven by Eastern guys appealing to Rome to excommunicate other Eastern guys. Now, then we stopped agreeing about which councils count as ecumenical councils, because then they're slow from 800 to 1054. They're slow motion going into schism, we say. But then the schism was solved for about 15 years. Did you know this? The Orthodox rejoined the Catholic Church in 1439. 31 out of their 33 delegates at the Council of Florence, I think that's the 17th ecumenical council by our count, affirmed the Union of Florence, the reunion, where they said, sorry, we were wrong about the filioque and about the universal jurisdiction of the Pope. But when they returned home from the meeting over the next decade, their governments, which were aligned with the Eastern Emperor, and the peasants, and some of the monks too, and some of their scholars, with pitchforks, rejected the union and coerced the delegates into removing their affirmation of both papal primacy and the filioque. Now, the ironic thing here is one of the affirmative defenses, as a contracts attorney, I know this, against, I signed that contract, but someone had a gun to my head, would be duress. They claimed they were under duress because they had to fight the Muslims. That doesn't count as duress. We weren't the ones putting the gun to their head, the Roman Catholic Church. Closer to meeting the elements of duress was the Eastern Orthodox angry peasants and monks that greeted them when they returned home. They had pitchforks, and they were essentially calling them sellouts. And remember, at that council, Florence, even the Patriarch of Constantinople, their top guy, was one of the 31 signers. He said, we need to do this. We need to rejoin. We need to come correct. We need to get right with Rome. And his successor, do you think his successor was a pro-union or an anti-union guy? You'd probably think anti-union. His successor was also a pro-union guy after he died. And they exiled him. Does this sound like duress? This sounds like duress to nullify the union, not duress to make the union. The second Patriarch of Constantinople, who affirmed the Union of Florence, they exiled him, and they finally got a third guy, a third Patriarch of Constantinople since the signing of the thing, who would, go back into schism. But a lot of people forget this, that we solved the schism for a while, and they admitted they were all wrong. Baby girl came back to baby, and with full admission. You can go read that at the Council of Florence. It's really interesting. Remember, first among equals, the kind of nonsense cope is ecclesial mutual submission, nothing more. It's a nonsense term. Appellate jurisdiction is more than just a symbolic or an honorary power. Look at what happened at Ephesus. Dwight Schrute, unlike Pope Celestine, couldn't fire the employees of Dunder Mifflin. He was maybe just a sort of symbolic honorary number two in Dunder Mifflin those days when Michael Scott would have to leave the office. He couldn't fire anyone. So he's not the real boss. But the Pope is the real appellate JDX authority because he could fire people, and they were acknowledging it. The Orthodox view of papal power, not the Catholic one, is what shifted. It shifted downward in the second Christian millennium, rather than how they characterize it, that the Catholic one changed by shifting upward to expand and heighten the power. And this is why even a lot of Catholics are confused. We Catholics, we're always willing to believe lies about ourselves from the Protestants and from the Orthodox, that we really do kind of worship the Pope, that he is really ultramontane, that his view, the view of his power really ought to be capacious and expansive. Don't be a dupe. The soul of Catholicism is papal minimalism. That's why I hung that show with Elijah Yazzie. It's pre-recorded. Go watch it on Vatican I. I'm not going to repeat all that now. I hung that the day we recorded it Wednesday before I left, And we hung it the day to be viewed the day that I had the debate on Friday. So go watch that. It's not in live videos. It's in, the pre-recorded ones. So I'm not going to go over all the Vatican I stuff. Elijah does that really, really, really well. I do want to say the other reason that we're the true Christian church is because of the four marks of the church. 1, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. Papal infallibility and papal primacy safeguards the doctrinal oneness. We're oneness of place and we're oneness of time over the course of time. It's not about personal holiness of all the popes. We've had some bad guys. But without this mechanism of papal infallibility, papal primacy, there's no final doctrinal certitude, but only majority consensus, which, by the way, has failed to protect orthodoxy from division or ambiguity. I know I've harped on the fact that they're not of one mind among the 14 autocephalous Orthodox churches on contraception and divorce and even women deacons. But take the issue Jay was picking with me from Vatican II, from Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate. What about what these documents say about Hindus, Muslims who are polytheists, and Hindus and Buddhists who are polytheistic, and Muslims who are monotheistic? Sounds like we're cozying up too much to them in these two Vatican II documents, aren't we? Well, even your church, Gregory Palamas, and lots of different Eastern patriarchs have said exactly what we say. Different story with the Abrahamic faiths, right? With Muslims and Jews, they are called the Western monotheisms or the Abrahamic monotheisms. We've accepted this. Now, neither of them understand that God is a Trinity, but they're still by sense, if not by reference, sense-reference dichotomy, pointing at the Abrahamic God and saying we worship him. They do so without knowing he's a Trinity. But they actually do, by sense, allude to the same God, and they're trying to pray to the same God. There are great proofs of this, even in the Old Testament, right? There's a difference between praying to the false gods. We'll say something about polytheism, like Buddhism and Hinduism in a second. We're not even praying to the one God. But when it's competing conceptions of the one Abrahamic God, even if they're worshiping him the wrong way or not understanding that his nature is triune, they are still talking about the one true Abrahamic God. And I know even a lot of Catholic trads don't like this, and Jay expected that I was one of those Catholic trads that gets bent off about this, and I don't. Pope Pius X in his personal catechism referred to Muslims as worshiping the one true God. And there's one or two medieval popes that said the same thing. And I think Bellarmine says the same thing. The Muslims do worship the one true God. Gregory Palamas, their favorite 2nd century Orthodox scholar, favorite of many, said the same thing. Lots of their patriarchs have said the same thing. It's sort of, like I said in the Tim Pool debate, Community College, Intro to Religions 101. There are 3 monotheisms in the history of the world. They all stem from Abraham in some way. Islam traces it more to Ishmael than Isaac under Abraham. I don't really care that much. The point is, Nostra Aetate and Lumen Gentium bracket Muslims or Jews. They say too much that's friendly to Jews in Nostra. But none of it's dogmatically false. They're just way too friendly to them. But when you talk about the polytheisms, like Jainism or Hinduism or Buddhism, then all that's being said in our Vatican II document that Jay got spun off about is some sort of verbiage, I specifically mean verb, that says they claim, they search, they believe. And then it'll say that they've found nirvana, that they can achieve oneness, or they can do whatever. By not eating cows, but by worshiping cows, they can have a great life. Whatever, I don't care. That is what they're claiming they can do. Specifically, with regard to the Hindus, Jay was really off on this. Here's what it is.
At some point, we have to play the clip where Tim Pool basically says he agrees with the Catholic position. And I know a lot of people were calling into question Tim Pool's endorsement, but that really is the mark of the debate. If you can convince somebody of that's not getting into the esoteric language, that's not part of the specific camps. If you can, by your presentation or through the church's presentation, through the documents, convince an outside party who doesn't know a lot about this stuff what sounds correct, game over.
Exactly. Precisely. Let me read that this is not Jay Dyer's fault. This is whatever. Nostra Aetate 2 in Latin reads this: Ita in Hinduismo homines mysterium divinum scrutantur et experimunt in exhausta fecunditate mithorum et acutis cognitibus philosophiae atque liberationem querunt ab angustiis nostrae conditiones vel performas vitae aestheticae vel per profundum meditationem vel per refugium ad Deum cum amore et confidentia. The key words here are querunt and scrutantur. These prove that they are just seeming. Querunt, meaning the realm of semblance. It seems to them. Scrutantur means they're searching it. My crazy Uncle Remus searches for the lost city of gold or whatever. He might search for Duckburg because maybe I showed him some old DuckTales DVDs. He wants to meet Uncle Scrooge, so he can search for Duckburg. That doesn't mean he can find it. It seems querunt to him that he can find it. So the Latin is much more clear. The English transliteration is fishy. I acknowledge this. There are lots of those Jesuits who are running the council thanks to two guys that really screwed stuff up for us, Ratzinger and Ronner. They are the two men. I know a lot of you worship Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger out there, but you shouldn't. It is called the Ratzinger-Ronner intervention, which changed Vatican II from being a clarifier of Vatican I on papal and bishop authority into being this whole renewal thing. Liberal Jesuit renewal thing. They changed the program, the scheme. Okay, so we say that this is a big problem. Orthodoxy lacks oneness and Catholicity lowercase c. Because it lacks oneness, it can't be worldwide. Can't be worldwide. Because you can't get all 14 autocephalous churches to agree about very basic natural law stuff like is contraception okay? It violates the natural law. How do Christians have it if it violates the natural law? They're holy and they're apostolic. But they're not one, they're not Catholic. And by the way, one holy Catholic apostolic as the marks of the church come from Ecumenical Council number 1 at Nicaea. It says this is the mark for whether or not Jesus' promise in Luke 22, Matthew 16, John 20, 1 Timothy 3:15, John 16, verse 13, Matthew 16, verse 18, John 17, verse 21. I want all the world to be one so the world may believe. Because if you're pitching two conflicting doctrines, the world won't believe, can't believe. All of those 7 or 8 scriptural passages require, said the First Ecumenical Council bindingly, that the church, for it to be the church, for it to be true, will be one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. Note, none of the other guys, I mean, obviously not the Protestant. Why do I keep even addressing him? But Jay would not address the 4 marks of the church because they know they're not one. I know we have tensions. I know we have some problems, but we don't have the fundamental problem of violating the marks of the church. They have like at least 14 churches, 14 traditions. They disagree about natural law and eternal law precepts. If there is a Christ-instituted head of the church, Roman Catholicism is true.
And holy in these religions.
Oh, sorry.
There's a high regard for the man.
Did everybody hear that?
What?
The sub clip from Tim Pool just started playing in the background since we're having a hard time with all of our clips playing. So
Yeah, I mean, so
We should play that. Oh, they actually did hear that. I wonder if I could play that. For some reason, like, because
Yeah,
the
can you play
internet
that?
is very lagging because of this, like, incredible storm that we're having. Let me see if I can play it for everybody. This was an interesting moment in the debate where Tim Pool, they were arguing over, oh boy, let's see, it's acting so funky right now. I don't know if you have it, Tim, the audio of it, but let me see if I can do it. This was an interesting part where you and Jay were fighting over the Vatican II documents. And Tim just asked, hey, let me just read this myself, because Jay was reading a line, and Tim Pool wanted to see the fuller context for the passage. So he read the full passage on the show. And then afterwards he says, like, yes, this is basically what the Catholic Church is saying. I agree with what the Catholic Church is saying here.
Said it 4 times.
Yeah, somebody went through, one of the people who watched your show, and actually counted how many times Tim Pool said he actually agreed with the Catholic position, and it was like 4 or 5 times. Let me see if I can play this. I don't know if it'll work. See, it's just acting so funny because our internet's acting laggy because of the storm we're having. I don't know if you have it on your phone, Tim, and you can just Bluetooth it in. I sent it to you on text.
Yeah, which one is this?
This is the this is
Here I have one.
Oh, you have one. This is the one where he was saying
that which I read is more convincing to me of the Catholics.
How about this?
That one, yeah.
Yes, the Jesuits are Catholic.
From the Orthodox perspective.
Newsflash.
You just
Protestant
complained
says
about the
Jesuits
Jesuits.
are Catholic.
From the
You just
Orthodox.
complained about them and said they're too liberal.
Yes, that's a
What's-
well-known
what's-
Catholic
what is it,
position.
That Protestant didn't know whatever. Here's Tim, I think,
Says-
saying it again.
The Catholic Church rejects nothing of what is true and holy in these religions.
There it is.
There's a high regard for the manner of life and conduct, the precepts and doctrines which, although differing in many ways from its own teaching, nevertheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men and women. Yet it proclaims and is in duty bound to proclaim without fail Christ, who is the way, the truth, and life. In him, in whom God reconciled all things to himself, people find the fullness of their religious life.
Thank you. I was going to ask
I
for the
don't
book
know
so I
what you
could
think.
read that.
All that shows is
feel
a
like-
contradiction.
No, no.
That doesn't help you out.
I actually agree with the Catholic view. It's basically saying the way I interpret that is to saying Hindus and Buddhists are looking through a keyhole and seeing these fragments that they're not quite understanding properly.
Shrewd.
If they were to adhere to Jesus Christ and find the way.
Precisely
The
what
problem
it's-
is not-
and that's
the
precisely what all
problem-
the even
That's-
non-liberals
that's
at
false.
the council
The problem
said.
So I'm not a big Vatican II guy. You guys know that. There's a bad intent that a lot of the liberals had to make people confused about what the church taught, but they did not change the teachings. And this is the case. And Tim was really impressive. He is like, no, they're looking through a keyhole. They're seeing a partialized view. It's not enough to save them. Their invincible ignorance is what saves them. There's the fat white rapper that made a video out there who thinks that it's actually their religion, not just the belief in the partialized premises of a partially true belief, which saves them, but actually their worship, which evidences them say. So I think he even said Baal worshipers have something good in their worship. The difference between the belief of false religion believers and the worship of false religion worshipers is belief can be partialized because any conclusion has premises, and some of the premises in even a false conclusion are true. And we can point at that and we can say, well, Hindus acknowledge that there is a creator. They might think there are multiple, but the creator should be worshipped, and the worship is good when you worship creators. That's all true. They just think there's like 300 million gods. But we can take their premises and partialize them and say, this is true, this isn't true. Whatever's true is still good. This has always been the Catholic position since like the year 400 on polytheism. Nothing in their worship is good. And there are idiot Catholics out there that actually think worshiping Baal is partially good. No. Maybe some of the premises in worshiping a false god are good because you're saying, according to the first principle of practical reason, that worship of the creator is good. But the worship itself violates the first commandment and is 100% bad, because actions can't be, according to Aristotelian action theory, can't be partialized the same way that propositional truth claims are partialized into their premises and conclusions. But if you're a fat white rapper fat, white, divorced rapper, you're too dumb to see this. Okay, but this is what I was saying. And Tim Pool, on the other hand, is smart enough to see this, and he picked up on it almost right away. It was very impressive.
Be very clear. The Anglican Catholic position, and by extension the Methodist position, because Methodists are Anglicans, is that the Methodist Church, the Anglican Church, all of them, they're not the superior one true church.
Sounds good. Sounds really good. That's going to get me up on a Sunday morning.
Pope submitting to the council not prove that the council as a whole
not at all. No.
has authority over the Pope.
It proves that the Pope bears a collegial relationship.
But Vatican I says that the council's not above a Pope. You know that.
So of course,
So
it's not above a Pope.
Then why is Vigili submitting?
Because everyone else. Here's an example of me just like, look, you could say what you want. I know there are points you want to get out. I want to get out my points too. I'm not bound to respond in an opening or second opening statement to, this is not cross-exam, which is why Jay and I need to do a formal debate where there's no interrupting and everyone gets his time to get stuff out. I'm really good, probably from, I don't know, dysfunction in my life or something. I got in too many arguments with relatives early on. I'm just too good at not accepting the premise. I'm going to say my point. I'm just going to talk past that because this is not the cross-ex point in the first half hour of this debate. Protestants and Orthodox misunderstand what the Pope's primacy is.
That seems quite convenient to the Catholic argument.
Exactly.
Well, it is. It's highly inconvenient to the Catholic argument that you misunderstand it. The Pope is a good line.
That's good.
That's a good line. So,
It was funny in the green room because Jay Dyer's wife and I were in not in the studio with you guys. You guys were in like the soundproof studio, and we were on the outside watching the debate on a screen. It was funny because there was a 20-second delay. So his wife and I would laugh because we would hear you guys like just shouting from the room, and it would be a particularly calm part on the screen of what we were watching. So we knew like in 20 seconds it was going to erupt into like another like yelling match, which is, we were kind of all laughing about that.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Okay. So Timcast wants me to post some of these clips and then they'll retweet them. It's always better to be the original one. I'll just say this as to the whole Hinduism thing in Vatican II. St. Gregory Nazianzus in the 4th century said many of those outside our faith and name belong to us precisely because of their way of life, which is all the church is teaching. St. Justin Martyr in the 2nd century, widely accepted by the Orthodox tradition. Steph found all these, so I'm going to read them. All who lived according to the Logos are Christians, even though they were called godless. I mean, this sounds, it's kind of shocking to say, kind of like Karl Rahner's Anonymous Christian. It seems fruity because it's from Karl Rahner in Vatican II, but it's pretty close to that. I'm not distinguishing here to exactly what it was, but Father George Florovsky, who is a 20th century Orthodox theologian, said, we must not deny the possibility of salvation to those who in good faith live outside the boundaries of the visible metropolitan Callistos, where we just don't know who goes to heaven and hell. And so it's not as big of a deal. We can say where the church is. We cannot say where it is not. The Orthodox Church said this, and it's, wait, I don't want to get this wrong. We can say where the church is. We cannot say where it's not. In pastoral practice, the Orthodox Church often accepts Catholic and some Protestant baptisms as valid. That's different because we all are Christian. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but this is not a big problem. Not all those who are outside the church are wholly cut off from the Church of Christ. We say
immediately following this prayer, it says,
what?
The Catholic Church rejects nothing.
Sorry, it just started playing. So why don't we just play this?
Holy in these religion.
Oh, now it stopped again. Of course.
Conduct. The precepts and doctrines which, although differing in many ways from it, less off.
See, it's just acting so funny because of the storm. Sorry. Okay. I don't know. Now I have to figure out how to mute this again because all the things disappeared. So pardon.
Okay, let's see if he can. All right, so I mean, this is there's lots of funny behind the scenes stuff. Steph and Jamie were sitting in the green room and they were just chuckling at the 20-second delay. They'd hear us yelling through the glass in the other room, and they're like, 20 seconds, buckle up, we're gonna start again. They were watching it on a big TV in the green room, and they're like, it's coming, the wave's coming in 20 seconds, and they got a kick out of that. And Jamie was a very nice lady. Got to talk to her more this time than the first time I met her. Mm-hmm. I met Jay and Jamie in person at Elliot Holz's house about 2 years ago. Was it 2 or 3? and I think 2. And I was mainly talking to Jay then because that was the first time we met. I talked to Jay more this time. Very nice lady. She was keep buying my kids candy and kept giving up candy. The kids loved her.
Yeah.
So sweet lady, and Steph liked her. And I what you see on screen is not always real. Sometimes it is. Some of these Catholics, like fat white rapper man, just who thinks you can worship Baal and be partly praised by heaven for it. I don't want to hang out with him, but a lot of people are a lot kinder in person than you think they are. Go ahead.
There's some super chats. So you want to go through that right now?
Sure.
Okay. Jonathan says, here's some Uber Eats delivery money. Good job on making Jay Dyersburg. Thank you for that. Funnily enough, we were ordering out while we were there, and we got home super late the other day, and I ordered out again just because I was like, oh gosh, we drove just crazy amounts of hours, but I forgot to update the address, so our order got delivered to our hotel room that we were no longer staying in. So thank you for that cash. Okay. Thank you for helping me clarify some of my mistake. Okay, so Brenton says you should do an episode with James from DMA.
DMA, remind me who that is or what that is. Clarify in comments, and I'll try.
Minaya says, God bless you and your family. DMA's video on who is that? Polymus and Lumen Gentium is a must watch.
Sounds good. But remind me who DMA is. Someone was saying that to me, and I'm like,
yeah, I'd like. We'll probably hear it and be like, oh, all right, okay. Quick note, my dude. I personally make the best pancakes in the world. Cracker Barrel is a distant second. That's quite a claim.
It's a big claim, but if it's true, then that's something to be proud of.
Tim, have you ever read the Quran or the Hadith where Muhammad was receiving messages from jinn, which are demons, who were pretending to be angels?
Yeah, I know of that segment. And big parts of the Quran come from Talmud. Jay was actually telling me, or big parts of at least the Hadith come from the Talmud. The Muslims are not proud of this. No one would be proud of that or could. You're not getting the sense reference dichotomy if you think that when we talk about, say, the morning star and the evening star, the sense reference dichotomy becomes really clear. The morning star and the evening star are what? Both Venus. But there are different senses of the same reference. So there can't be two that's a one, right? Morning star, evening star. They're both Venus. So by sense, you would say the morning star and the evening star are different, appreciable. But by reference, it's the same planet. It's Venus. This is how Ed Fazer has really, really ably described the difficulties of the long-standing Catholic tradition, which articulates that the Muslims worship the one true God. Lumen Gentium or Nostra don't even say true; they just say the one God. Pius X said one true God. Okay. Others, Bellarmine, a medieval pope, has said they worship the one true God. By sense, it's true, the one true God. By reference, it's not the one true God at all, because they don't understand the triune nature of it. Same thing with Jews, obviously. But that doesn't mean you have to stop saying, according to Catholic theology, which did not change at Vatican II, you don't have to say that they're not an Abrahamic faith. The Catholic religion, even I think Leo the Great says at least one of the two of Leo the Great was before Islam, so it must have been Judaism. This is an Abrahamic faith. It doesn't require being the correct version of the Abrahamic monotheism, Christianity, which acknowledges the triune God, according to Roman Catholic teachings for almost 2,000 years, in order to say that they're Abrahamic or that they're monotheists. Now, Jay was saying, well, Orthodox believe the opposite. Well, not Gregory Palamas, not several other Orthodox scholars, and even patriarchs. But that's the whole point. And several of them say, well, the opposite, that the Muslims would actually have to understand the Trinity nature of God in order to say that they're an Abrahamic monotheism. Okay, so they're on both sides of the issue. That's the whole point, man. That's the bigger point that you want to avoid, is that your church is not one church. It's not Catholic, lowercase c. So there are different churches that say things more in line with what you want them to say. All I was saying is that don't expect the Catholic Church to teach what Jay Dyer wants them to teach, but it would be a potent counterpoint for him to bring up if the Catholic Church had ever contradicted itself on what is required, the language that's required to describe the other two Abrahamic faiths. Do they worship the one true God? The Catholic Church has always been at one with itself. That's my point. I'm not saying the Catholic teaching is perfectly synonymous with the Orthodox teaching. I don't care. But it was rendered a moot point once I showed that this has always been the Catholic view of it.
DMA, by the way, is Divine Mercy Apologetics, and Elijah is going to put you in contact with them.
Okay.
Desvolt says, thank you for defending the faith. Lauren sent a super chat on the Catholic on the panel was the only one with control over his emotions, thus proving the superiority of our faith. I've always understood understood Vatican to be a pastoral council, not dogmatic, correct?
No, this is the pastoral / dogmatic dichotomy is a false one. And it's something that recognize and resist people say. It's a distinction without a difference, because there are, for one thing, there are dogmas being deaf. This is really, I think some of the Lateran councils are strictly dealing, it's not pastoral versus dogmatic, it would be disciplinary versus dogmatic, if you want to be much, much, much more accurate. And I think a couple of the Lateran councils were, but there are dogmas being dealt with most of the time that you handle even a disciplinary matter. Mm-hmm. So these are questions of irreformable doctrine. Like, you can't go from teaching that Hinduism is soteriologically valid on its own to Hinduism is soteriologically invalid, or vice versa on its own. That would be dogmatic, and that is what's being dealt with in like Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate. So no, that's a wrong talking point. Catholics need to come off of the recognize and resist stuff. That doesn't mean we have to love Pope Francis or love Pope Paul VI or love even John the 23rd, because we are minimalist. So there's a difference between saying I'm a papal minimalist, which I am, and which the Roman Catholic Church is that video I did with Elijah hung on Friday shows. It doesn't mean that we can resist, say, the Pope if he takes us into the realm of a new discipline or a new version of the Mass, because that's disciplinary. Vatican II, though, does deal with dogmas, and you can't just elide them by saying that distinction without a difference. I've never been there. We have to deal with the Vatican II documents for what they say now. The documents are different than the spirit of Vatican II. The documents were written, and people have been saying that forever. I agree with more so with SSPX people. The documents were clearly written with a nefarious intent, but because of Scalian textualism rather than Stanley Fishian intentionalism as a hermeneutical device, we interpret not based on a nasty private intent to use weaponized ambiguity that they'll later, as Skilabik said, misinterpret or stretch. You judge language on the original public meaning of the terms as they were ratified by all the thousands of ratifiers of those drafted texts at the time. And what they ratified truly was the original public meaning, which was the less threatening, less revolutionary, less incendiary, less subversive sense of the page in those documents.
The Catholic Church
there it
rejects
goes again. Maybe we'll show that clip at the end finally, now that it's working. Sean, thank you. Sean Fernando became a new YouTube member. Thank you. And Susie Glaze sent us a super chat, and she said, would you describe what the difference between what the different scapulars are for, please? I think that's what she meant.
You mean green versus brown? I'd have to do a quick research. I've never consistently worn the brown scapular because for a while I was under a misapprehension of what the daily precepts were, what you had to practice to do so. So maybe ask me another time. I'm not trying to avoid your question. I'll always tell you if I don't have it all up here. I store a lot up here, and I don't usually have to use my notes. I don't, that's the Amy Coney Barrett in me. For serious, guys.
For serious.
But I haven't. I forget what some of the finer points of distinction are, and it is less onerous to wear a brown scapular, in terms of daily precepts and the routines you have to follow, than I formerly thought. So I do need to get one and start wearing it again. I had one. I took it off because I thought, I'm not doing what's required. I'm pretty serious. I'm pretty good about integrity. Even if I'll cut corners or I'll be lazy. I have high integrity about, like, if I'm being lazy and the scapular requires that I do more than X, Y, or Z, then I won't wear it. It's less than I thought at that juncture.
Here is the video. I hope you guys can hear it. Let me know if you can't. But finally, I think I downloaded it so you can hear it.
Is this on Twitter?
This is the video where Tim Pool was finally getting to the point where he read Vatican II documents and what he said in his response to agreeing with those documents. So let's see if this will work. Let me know in chat. I'll stop it if it's not working. So let's go.
It says, the Catholic Church rejects nothing of what is true and holy in these religions.
There it is.
There's a high regard for the manner of life and conduct, the precepts and doctrines which, although differing in many ways from its own teaching, nevertheless often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men and women. Yet it proclaims and is in duty bound to proclaim without fail Christ, who is the way, the truth, and life. In him, in whom God reconciled all things to himself, people find the fullness of their religious life.
Thank you. I was going to ask.
I don't know what you think. All that shows is a contradiction.
No,
that doesn't help you out.
I actually agree with the Catholic view. It's basically saying, the way I interpret that is to saying Hindus and Buddhists are looking through a keyhole and seeing these fragments that they're not quite understanding properly. And if they were to adhere to Jesus Christ and find the way,
precisely
the problem is
and that's precisely what all the even non-liberals at the council
said.
There that is. And then another super chat. It was a great point in the video, seeing it full context and having an outsider agree Catholic view. True.
Yeah, I mean, and then so it's cheap. Everyone he's the closest thing the debate had to a moderator. He's the show's host. And he's a pretty secular guy. Admittedly, he'll admit that. And to have him saying no, he says it 4 or 5 times. I agree with the Catholic position, even though his original tweet was kind of sarcastic, calling us the superior Christians. That's quite a thing. And I'm not claiming that was all my forensics. I'm a good debater, but that wasn't a formal enough debate for me to claim credit. I think the church claims credit because even in our liberalist period, Vatican II, the documents are still solid.
Yeah. Things are going crazy. Here's another clip. I don't know if it, because we were having a hard time showing them earlier, so I just wanted people to see them now. So let me do this and then, sorry, so they can see it. Sorry, we're trying to figure out how to get back. Oh boy.
Okay, well, that's pretty good. I mean, if there's any other specific post-mortem type questions people have, then
let's see here. People are saying regarding the scapulars. So brown scapular is Carmelite. White scapular is Dominican. There is a purple. Where to go? There's a purple and green scapular as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Hopefully. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so it's been
here we go.
Crazy couple of days, and Father John was laughing that I said like the Jordan flu game. It feels like that though when you're rolling around with some injuries, real physical injuries, and you're driving the big 30-foot RV, and I got 7 kids, in the wife in tow, and we have our dear friends staying at the house here for the last month with us. And so you're leaving and you have all this stuff to do. It feels zany to show up to a debate where there's a single guy or another guy who has brought his wife, but they're closer and not driving around this 30-foot RV. You feel kind of silly. Feels a little bit like a clown car, but it feels good to go and do people were giving me high marks. Without the interruption, I can do a lot better, which is why Jay and I were seeking to redo this on a big channel with formal moderation. But to do an adequate or better job, which at least one person at that debate did not do. Everyone knows who that one person is. He failed to do an adequate job, the Protestant. To go and to drive 14 hours, do a decent job, for the workers in the vineyard on their behalf.
Sleeping in a Cracker Barrel parking lot the night before.
Twice, the night before and the night after, and having the kids kind of waiting in the RV outside of the Tim Pool studio. It feels good. You feel like, hey, I got 37 points in this game, even though I was puking up to it. So you want to be Jordan, where Pippen got that headache in I think it was the previous year's playoffs, the migraine. And it affected his performance. You can't really blame him. Sometimes you're so affected adversely by physical limitations and physical, contingent circumstances that it does mess up your performance. Other times, you get that Jordan flu game performance. You're like, okay, we're traveling not light. We're traveling kind of heavy. Brought the whole family because I don't like being apart from him. I'm John Madden. I don't like flying. But you feel, more Jordan than Pippen there. And that's how we felt getting back. But I'm still a little bit tired and catching up. And we're going to take off next week for another vacation. But it'll be, we'll have some shows this week that ought to be, they will be very nice concomitants to a post-debate debrief. I would say that's really important. If you want to support the channel, then do so on locals. That's how you can support us. If you want to, people know Abby's 17th birthday is coming up. They know her crazy story. She was born there where I was beginning to begin a PhD in Rome with tons of health problems, still affected by all kinds of health and insurance needs. If you want to donate, go to timothyjgordon.com and click donate. But if you want to support the show, it's locals. If you want to support yourself, get out of your blue state, get to a red state, go to realestateforlife.com. And if you're a single guy or a single gal and you like the ideas of rules for retrogrades, sign up for a matchmaking program where we really begin the new cohort tomorrow. Go to timothyjgordon.com. It's no longer return matchmaking. We don't do that anymore. So you will not be getting a match from Tim and Steph if you go to return matchmaking. Go to timothyjgordon.com. And we expanded the age. We're helping to match slightly more middle-aged people now, but we're still keeping basically anyone who's 20 and older. And, we got 9 marriages on a very short-term basis, 9 engagements, marriages. When we were with Return, we made or helped to make those. So if you want what we do and you want the pre-sorting of a retrograde gal or a retrograde guy, go to timothyjgordon.com. The 3 dating boot camp classes that we require our cohorts to take begin tomorrow. There's a Tuesday boot camp A, there's a Wednesday boot camp B, and a Thursday boot camp C. And after that, we're going to be in this cohort making matches. You have to sign up first and fill out a little questionnaire. Guys pay for it. The women are more or less free. The class is a little extra, but go to timothyjgordon.com and click matchmaking. God bless you all. Des Volt. Peace out.
Amen.